ゲン、君は千空の死体を見たわけじゃない。万が一どこかで生きていれば、いつか村を見つけて科学王国を作るだろう。考えうる最も危険なシナリオだ。戦闘員が揃い次第、武力で村を制圧する。
Hello everybody, Megazard here, and I'm back at it again to give y'all another exciting episode review over Dr. Stone, this time being over episode 18, Stone Wars. And if you haven't already checked out my episode 17 review over Dr. Stone, you can go ahead and click that card in the corner, check that video out, and then come back and check this one though. But, oh gosh, this episode, man, I am super excited for what's about to come because, man, it's been a while since we've seen Tsukasa being a threat though, but now we're finally about to make that transition and go back over to that other big looming threat that we've been thinking about ever since Senku barely managed to get away thanks to Taiju and Yuzuru's help. And he managed to come over here to this little village, and now he's the village chief. And who would have thought that now we're about to see the clash between two titans now, between Senku and Tsukasa. And this is just basically the calm before the storm, or just those little tiny fights that you'd be getting at the very beginning of a fight before you're about to get the major clash of the two titans though. But overall, I was genuinely impressed with this episode, the way how they were able to combine the scientific elements in here as well as keeping the action high and mighty though. But I'll dive all into that within this review, so go ahead and sit back and relax and get comfortable as we're about to get ready to dive into this latest episode review of Dr. Stone.
ほう、一瞬で人数の不利に気づいて橋での一騎打ちに誘ってるのか。いいですね、すごくちゃんとしてる。
ゼロに達して今をかけて流れる赤い血のよ、背を引いて殻を割って咲いた花の模様をつなげてし筆を持って取り戻してく命、目に見えないルールがリコリコルを探しに行く。
So starting off at the very beginning of the episode, we're picking off at the tail moments of episode 17, where, Senku was, just announced the village chief, and everybody was just kind of partying, kind of drinking away, eating food, just celebrating, having a good time and stuff. And leave it to Kinro to basically say, you know what, even during these happy times, we still got to keep our guards up because you never know who might be trying to knock on our doorstep. And especially with some of the things that, Senku's been telling them stories about of, kind of where he came from and some different encounters he had with different people though. And it was a good thing Kinro was on top of his game, and he had to literally drag Ginro with him, because while they were over there standing at their post, Kinro noticed that, there was like a little shake in the bushes or whatever. And he looked up and noticed that there was like a group of them, and they easily outnumber both Kinro and Ginro. So Kinro basically told Ginro, hey, you need to go back to the village and tell everybody, say, hey, the enemy is here, and we need to basically protect the town, the children, the women, everybody else. And if for some reason, if I don't, manage to win these fights, and something bad were to happen to me, I need you, Ginro, to essentially cut down the bridge so that way we can keep our village safe. So Ginro had to rush back, and he basically told Senku and the rest of the gang, and they were quickly making their way back over here though. But the one thing I like about this scene with Kinro basically taking on this group of attackers is he is very smart in terms of his battle knowledge, and he knows he can't win an open battle because that would be hard. You can easily outflank somebody, 1 to 4, 1 to 3, and it'll be a very uphill battle for you to win. So he knew he was basically trying to draw the men onto the bridge so that way, he can do basically one-on-one. And with the spear weapon he had, the spear can go the distance, and he could basically be able to penetrate and hit anybody from a fairly safe distance. And if worst case scenario happens, he can cut down the bridge and take him down all with him. So Kinro was basically playing this game very safely. And by the time Ginro got back with the rest of the crew, they basically saw how he was battling and stuff. And basically, the other 3 dudes that basically tried to attack Kinro at first, they weren't very smart. They didn't kind of see through the stuff. And then this new guy basically showed up. And before Senku came over here with the rest of his gang, there was Gin, and Gin was basically kind of giving like a status update of everything, and this dude is basically acting like a double spy at this point in the game. Like, he's mainly working for, our Kingdom of Science, but he's also associating himself with, Tsukasa's empire as well, and basically kind of pulling information from there and trying to pull it and, give the information to Senku, because he basically said, hey, you got that cola? Man, I'm going to be with you 100% of the way. But anyway, he told him that Tsukasa isn't the only threat out there. He basically said there's Tsukasa and there's this guy that was revived like a few days ago called Hyoga, and he's almost just as dangerous as Tsukasa. And we got to see why, Gin thought about this dude. But anyway, they came back over, and then Gin was looking at him and saying, oh crap, that's the other dude I warned you about. That's Hyoga. This dude, spells bad news and stuff. And Hyoga, he ain't like your typical caveman, so to say. Like, he didn't just come in there with like, some bamboo, or just not just like straight bamboo, but like sticks and stones and everything else though. But no, he came in here with this bamboo revolver, kind of a so basically he had this big old long spear, and he stuck it in some bamboo, and it was able to twirl it around. And when he was able to twirl it around, it was like a moving kind of a projectile but it was a melee weapon at the same time. So with that spear moving so fast with that centripetal force and everything though, it would have been very hard to block or deflect. So it was, it basically managed to kind of get around Kinro's defenses, and it managed to pierce him. So then he was kind of wounded on the bridge, and then he was telling Ginro, hey, you need to cut down the bridge. You need to think about the children. We got to keep the village safe. And then Ginro was about to go ahead and cut the bridge, but then he just couldn't get himself to do it because of that bond between him and Kinro. He just honestly could not do it, and I don't blame the dude, because it'd be hard to think, hey, you're trying to save somebody, but at the same time, it's going to cost one of your best friends' lives at the same time, though. So it was hard for him to do it. So then Senku quickly came up with a plan out of his pocket, and he basically had a little bit gunpowder left, and he was basically devising the plan. And Gin was basically working on the same wavelength that Senku was basically thinking. And he basically walked up to Magma and said, hey, you're the strongest one here. Hey, I need you to throw this rock over there on the cliff. You don't necessarily have to hit somebody, but I just need you to do it. And then Magma was kind of questioning, like, why should I trust you, or something like that, though. But through, Gin's, power of persuasion, he was able to convince Magma to do it. And basically, Senku used the gunpowder as the bluff. So he shot it, acting like it was a gun, but Magma was the one that actually threw the rock against the wall. That way, it kind of seemed like it was a gunshot going off. And all of a sudden, those attackers looked at him and was like, oh shoot, he has guns. Hey, we need to retreat. And then the three of them basically took off and ran. And then Hyoga was like, oh, this is interesting. So if you managed to create gunpowder and create guns, then you're the one that basically Tsukasa was the one that warned me about. So you must be Senku. And he was like, and then Senku basically owned up to it. And he's like, yep, I am Senku. And you can tell Tsukasa, hey, I'm still alive and living. I'm still kicking. I'm still breathing. And hey, you come and mess with me. Hey, I'll be ready with my weapons of science. So basically, he made his stand against Tsukasa's empires. These were the kind of the people that essentially, go out and survey and see what they're up against. They're kind of like his scouting party to kind of see like how strong the enemy is and what they're all capable of, and whether or not they can actually win the battle, or if they could win the battle, how would they kind of approach the battle in terms of their plan of attack and everything else though. So Senku made his presence known to Tsukasa's scouters. And at this point, Hyoga, as well as the rest of his scouters, they basically took off, and fear for safety, they just kind of went off along with Gin. Gin basically ran back with him, because with him being a double spy, he just basically couldn't stay with the village people, so he had to also take off as well. And at this point, the rest of the crew kind of gathering around, was like, man, what are we gonna do? And essentially it was like, well, at this point in the game, Tsukasa is gonna know that I'm still living and stuff. So that was basically the first sign of them, kind of getting prepared to attack them. And essentially it's like, all right, well, now we're going to have to start, making weapons of science in order to help, defend ourselves and be able to combat against Tsukasa's empire. And then we transition into the next scene where, we basically kind of see Senku and the rest of the whole entire village, because now, you know, it's not just, you know, Senku's small group that's working with Science No, but no, now he's the village chief and everything. He has the whole village helping out freely, not just the people that just wanted to come over there and eat that ramen, but no, he has the full support of the village, and even more so now because the matter of fact that, hey, you got some villains coming over here that, you know, threaten your wives, to threaten your children and everything else though. So everybody was, you know, freely helping out and stuff, and you saw Kinro basically pushing himself, and, you know, he still was trying to recover from that blow that he kind of got to the gut. And essentially it was like, well, you know what we're going to do? We're basically going to start making some weapons. But we didn't know exactly at the time, at that point in the episode, what exactly they were going to make in order to combat them. Which I was kind of thinking on the lines of it could be guns, but at the same time, I was like, it would take a lot more science and probably a lot more time for them to make a gun compared to whenever, you know, that task force could potentially attack again. But the most important thing they needed to know is that they needed to figure out exactly how much time they had to work with before Hyoga and his group would potentially try to attack again against the village. Because, you know, just some guns, that wasn't going to fully scare them off. And then Senku basically said, you know what, they're going to attack whenever a storm is coming. And, you know, with a storm, with the winds blowing and, you know, potential rain that could be falling down, you can't be shooting off guns the way that they're making them, essentially. They want to be able to shoot off guns effectively, so that's when they're basically going to make their strike. And basically, you know, some of the group around him was like, hey, how in the world do you know that that's going to be a thing? And he's like, you know, because of Gin. Gin is going to basically be able to convince them to think that. So it was once again showing how much that Gin as well as Senku are thinking on the same wavelengths as basically what they were going to try to plan and do. And basically it just showed Gin around Hyoga and some of the other men, and it was interesting to see how Gin was basically looking at Hyoga's weapon and it's like, oh, you know, this is kind of surrounded in bamboo, and it's kind of looking at it, and Hyoga's like, hey, you better put that weapon down or I'm basically going to have to cut you, essentially. And, you know, then you kind of see him jump back and all shocked and whatever though. But little did we know at the time he was doing something quite important during that scene, but we'll see what that actually entails later on in the episode though. But anyway, after a brief period of time from preparation on both sides, one with planning and then the other one trying to, you know, prepare weapons and stuff to help defend themselves, we get to the second encounter where Hyoga leads his charge against the other group. And beforehand, he was still debating on whether or not we needed to tell Tsukasa or we can go ahead and, you know, handle this little village by ourselves. Whether or not they need to call him back up or they were able to handle it. But the other dudes, they were convinced with, you know, once again with Gen's power of persuasion that they could handle it. And that's exactly what Gen needed to do, because he didn't need another little smaller force to tell them, you know, what kind of tricks they had up their sleeves at the moment though. But anyway, we get down to the second encounter between Hyoga and his group of spies that were sent out to scout from Tsukasa against Senku along with the rest of the village that needed to be protected. And it was basically Senku's group that was doing it. Anyway, we got that second confrontation, and it seemed like Senku was at a bad mismatch because he was just standing up on the bridge out of nowhere, and he looked like he had that black gunpowder to kind of scare them off again, and the wind kind of blew it out, so it made it seem like, oh shoot, Senku was about to, you know, get struck or about to get hit, or at the worst case scenario, about to get killed by these thugs. And all of a sudden, you just see all the other members jumping out. You see Kohaku jumping out, then you see Kinro jumping out, and then you see the previous village chief along with Magma, all of them jumping out from the side. And this was different. Like this was another advancement that they made within the Stone Age, because they weren't fighting with, you know, sticks with, you know, little spear tips on them. No, they weren't doing that mess no more. They came out here swinging guns a-blazing with some flashy black katanas. Yes, swords. And this was quite a shock. And it basically, you know, and then it kind of went back to the scene where they were actually making these katanas. And they were and Senku was kind of breaking down the process to, you know, the craftsmen and saying, hey, you know, you got to take this, you know, iron, you got to beat it a few times, heat it back up, heat it up to like 1200 something degrees, then take it out, beat it again, get the impurities out of it. And it was basically telling them how to basically form katanas and the process that it goes through, because basically it's not a perfect katana, because the process they did, it was kind of like a shortcut kind of way, and they were, you know, taking some shortcuts with how to make the katana because they were pressed for time. So they couldn't make the ideal katana, which required, you know, repeating certain steps about almost like 10 times. But they had to simplify it down to 2 and do some other things to help make these katanas on time. And with these katanas, they'll be able to cut through all of their, you know, wooden weapons that might have had like stones attached to them or maybe some spearheads attached to them on the end. No, they were able to cut through all of it. So basically, you know, the other 3 dudes were basically defeated because, you know, the katana was too powerful for that though. But Hyoga wasn't done with them. You knew this dude was going to keep on swinging. So he still had that same old weapon that, you know, had that centripetal force of that spinning spear. And he was still able to get around the katanas because basically with that spear and the way that he basically had that weapon working, it was like a versatile weapon, and it was able to basically stay on the same level, if not a little bit higher level, of the katanas because, you know, they were just holding these katanas for the first time. It's not like they were sufficiently trained with them. If they were, they might have stood a chance against Hyoga's weapon, but they're not. So this is like their first time, you know, messing with these weapons though. So that's an interesting thing to point out. And essentially, you know, Kohaku was like, hey, launch me up in the air. Let me get a surprise attack from the air. But even then, his weapon was still able to point up in the air. And it looked like, you know, she was about to get hit by the weapon. And then all of a sudden, his weapon just breaks. Like, it just falls apart. Like, the spearhead falls off. Everything falls off. And it looks like the wood or the bamboo part just split. And then he was looking down at it. He's like, why in the world would this split? And he was like, at first I was thinking, hey, you know, with it spinning like that, hey, it might have just wore out over time though. But then it went back to another flashback scene where Senku was basically talking to Suika and say, hey, Suika, I need you to give Gin a message. And she was like, wait, but how? Like, he's with the enemy. And he was like, you know what? You know that he's basically a spy for us. So essentially, he would basically leave a trail behind for us to be able to follow in case we need to get in contact with him again. So they sent Detective Suika out on the case to be able to deliver the item that needed to be given to Gin, and she was able to kind of figure out a trail of flowers that basically kind of led her to him. And he got this little item that Senku sent him, and it was basically like a very small blade that kind of represented or symbolized Lyre. But anyway, he used that little small weapon to actually cut the part of Hyoga's weapon, and was able to cut it where basically it looked like the weapon was fine, but, you know, used the weapon enough and it eventually wore out a lot quicker than what it normally would have. Thus his weapon just broke. And that's essentially where the episode ended though, as, you know, both teams are kind of looking at each other and just, you know, seeing how the showdown was going to play. And basically they broke all of Hyoga's team's weapons. So basically it seems like at the moment Senku's group won. But you always know there's like some crazy crap that always goes down in these episodes though. But we'll see if that holds true going into the next episode though. But that is all that I have for this episode review, and overall I really enjoyed it. I liked how they had those katanas. That one little picture of art scene that they had with, you know, with Kohaku having that katana sword. Ooh, shoot. She looked fine, and the rest of them looked so cool in that shot, though. But overall, I was just genuinely impressed with this episode, and I'm very curious to see exactly how events are going to unfold within the next week's episode. But yeah, that's about all that I have for this week's episode review over Dr. Stone episode 18, Stone Wars. So if you really like this review, go ahead and hit that like button and that subscribe button and hit that bell to stay notified of all things Dr. Stone that I'm reviewing this season. And also just a little quick housekeeping note, down in the description box below, you could always follow me on Twitter as I, you know, randomly say stuff about my day or just little small news updates or whatever I might be thinking of at the time though. But I also created a brand new Facebook page as well, so you can go ahead and click that link down in the description box down below and check that out, as I was doing some construction work, but it's finally done, so y'all can go ahead and follow that page and just see some other different content I'm just sharing along the side as well though. But other than that, make sure to tune in next time for episode 19, To Modernity. So until whatever video I make next, see y'all.
そそるだろう切れ味。これが科学の刃だ。